my sermon for Yom Kippur Yizkor 2023, 5784. This year for Yizkor, wrote a letter to my dad of blessed memory. It's to him. Of course, it's really for me and for all of us. Dear Dad, I guess it makes sense to start with what I didn't have a chance to say, or what I had the discretion not to say. Death was on my mind. You entered the hospital there in Wisconsin on Wednesday, December 14th, 2022. I got a call here in New Jersey the same day from Leon Rosenberg, his beloved wife Erna, who had a long battle with cancer, and the hospice nurses said that the conclusion was near. I was able to get directly to their place in Somerset Run. Leon and I sat by Erna's bedside, and I held her hand as I recited the Vidui, the deathbed prayers, as I've done countless times for countless individuals. The idea is to have something of a personal mini Yom Kippur, like Yom Kippur, and clear our slate, so we can get into the new year free of the burdens of past misdeeds. So too with the deathbed Vidui. We clear our slate for whatever might be next. When I reached the halfway point, Erna exhaled deeply, and everything in the room changed. We paused, and I inhaled deeply. That was it, I thought. But I've been wrong before. I finished the prayer. Leah and I looked at each other and stepped out of the room. The hospice nurse stepped in and confirmed our suspicion. The nurses are the real heroes, of course, those who ease suffering day in and day out in complex situations when emotions are as delicate as they come. I stayed with Leon as we made calls, arrangements, but really, I'd never been with anyone before as their soul left this world. Trying in some way to make that ultimate passage, I don't even know the word. We try to make it what it's capable of being. Dad, we had no way of knowing that 10 days later, you and I would share that moment. I was at the Rosenbergs for a few hours until the funeral home showed up. A few hours after that, Mom called. You had gone in for a routine platelet infusion, but they decided to admit you to the hospital. I'm not great with the medical details. I usually just don't comprehend the terminology. But a similar situation had happened in May. I flew out then to help Mom make decisions and what have you, and all turned out okay, or at least sort of okay. It wasn't until that Friday when Mom called again and had the nurse explain what was going on that it hit me. I still didn't understand the terminology being used, but I did understand that if the nurse was calling, that was all I needed to know. I booked a flight home before she was finished speaking. You were more or less okay, or at least the same exhausted self you had been since spring. Now, of course, I think I should have put two and two together and seen what was coming, but maybe that's just as well. So you, Mom, and I spent the next couple of days in the hospital room, watching a heroic amount of the NFL, and over your objections, the Soccer World Cup. We talked about everyday things, nothing so heavy or earth-shattering. Some family stopped by on Sunday to say hi. It was impressive that you were good with talking with them, given that you usually were not only not attention-seeking, but attention-shunning. The next day was similar, but your usual specialist was back, and he was finally able to arrange for a long-delayed transfer to a more well-equipped hospital in Milwaukee. The transfer was scheduled for 10 at night. Visiting hours ended long before that. We hung around a bit after hours to see the first quarter of the Monday night Packers game together. You told Mom to mail in the tax information, told me to make sure the car got moved on this bitterly cold December night. We said, I love you. We said goodnight. And with that, our lifetime of conversations were over. When does it need a grand final conversation? It's more than okay that we ended by noting that the pack had established the run. You lived your values every day without sermons or fancy book learning and had no need of grand gestures. You were formed by your first home on the corner of Oak and 3rd in Wausau, Wisconsin, a remote northern outpost of Jewish life if ever there was one. We didn't know any difference, you'd say. Your grandparents downstairs your family upstairs. Your mom helping out at her immigrant parents' broom factory. I have Uncle Chuck's broom factory photo on the wall in my office. And your dad walking to work every day to set type for the local newspaper. A good speller, despite being a non-native English speaker himself. Your mom was loving and intense, forceful and loud. Your dad quiet and calm, athletic and friendly. I think you idolize your father, but had more of your mother in you than you knew. You and Uncle Chuck set a great example of taking care of them when their strength failed. Reminds me of one of the resonant lines from the Yom Kippur service. Al tashlechenu la'et zikna, kechot kochenu al ta'atzvenu. Do not cast us away as we grow old. Do not desert us as our energy wanes. We ask it of God, with a hint of desperation. You guys made sure that they never needed to rely solely on divine intervention. Not that I imagine you were ever awake long enough to hear that part of the service. Years later, I would listen as you and Uncle Chuck would sit around the kitchen table, telling stories from mid-century Wausau, that vanished world. A world little noted nor remembered, the Jews of a small northern town, calling colorful characters and secret sins, shlemiels and successes, conjuring a cast of fools from your own personal helm. Back in Kenosha as a kid, I would be crying as you drove me to Hebrew school. I hate it, I said. I don't want to go. Why do I have to go? And you shouted back, because you have to. When I was a kid, I hated it, and I went, and I'm your father, and now you have to go. And every parenting book, every advice guru, every book says that that's the exact wrong thing to do, the exact wrong thing to say, the worst sort of parenting that will permanently turn kids off to Judaism. So, well, Dad, all I can say, from the Bima, this first Yom Kippur without you, is thank you for never reading a parenting book. You dragged us to temple as kids, and raised with your sarcastic manner, Andy and I would mock the stories we were told. Remember one that they told about the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, Judaism. They said that when the community faced a threat, that the Baal Shem Tov would walk to a special place in the forest, light a special candle, say a special prayer, and the danger would pass. After his death, his disciple, the Maggid of Mezrich, in times of risk to the community, would go to the special spot in the forest. He'd light the special candle, but he didn't know the words to the special prayer. But it was enough, and the danger would pass. After he was gone, his student would, in perilous times, go to the special spot in the forest, but he didn't know how to light the special candle or the words to the special prayer. But it was enough, and the danger passed. And now we don't know the words to the prayer, and we don't know how to light the special candle, and the location in the forest is long lost. But we know the story, and that is enough. So Andy and I, upon forgetting everyday things like a permission slip or lunch money, would say, but we know the story, and that is enough. And that trick of approaching things with a sense of humor, but not complete irreverence, of knowing what's important, but never being self-important, I can't reach your level of mastery of that. I can't really come close. But I know the story, whether or not that's enough. Your lifelong self-deprecating sense of humor. Let us know you never thought of yourself as much of a student, an opinion shared by teachers and professors. Your wisdom lay more in the elusive realm of street smarts. You knew your way around mechanical items the way I never could, making things sewing, leatherwork, metals. You knew how to talk to all classes and types of people, never acting superior to any person. You wouldn't have known to put on airs if you had airs to put on. We're fond of saying that you didn't know why Mom married you 57 years ago, only that she must have seen that you were the Woolworth's assistant manager with the greatest potential. But no one stays married for 57 years by accident. There has to be compromise and effort, mutual love and mutual respect. But then it's not your style to talk about such things. Deeds rather than words. Faced with barely getting through college at the height of the Vietnam War, you couldn't bring yourself to try to leverage a connection for a draft deferment. You found a safe and honorable workaround, military service without getting shipped to the jungles of Southeast Asia. You enlisted in the Air Force, Ask Uncle Howard for a 2-week crash course in orthotics, fitting and fashioning back braces and leg braces and the like, then BSing your way into the orthotics department in the Air Force, which meant that you got stationed in Europe, not Vietnam. When you parlayed your orthotic skills into buying Uncle Howard's brace shop from him, he told you that you had to be honest in business and generous to the community. When you grew older, an original thought became more exhausting. I think now I understand how hard that was. You repeated that fact endlessly, appreciative to Howard. He told you to be honest, you tried to live by it. And you did, but not in a sappy Yom Kippur sermon sort of way. You did it with an edge. You smoked, probably into your 40s, but I never really saw it. You hid it from Andy and me, though there was a pack of Winstons hidden in your car. Eventually it was replaced with a pack of toothpicks. Week-long trips with your buddies to remote Canadian fishing villages inaccessible by road. And sharing Kohorama, Kenosha's legendary fishing derby / beer and brat fest. The lakefront big top filled with bikers before motorcycles became bougie. People covered with tattoos before tattoos lost their power to shock. You were manning the grills for hot summer hours in a place that was family-friendly until it turned seedy at sundown, and the closing ceremony, giving away a new car to whoever caught the biggest fish, no less than a new AMC Gremlin. Through this, many tens of thousands of dollars were raised for parks, playing fields, special needs programs, through the selling of endless cans of old styles to Kenosha's thirsty masses. You did mitzvot your way, by helping by having fun, working long hours to make it happen, but building a community event in the process, a fair with local flavors that gave our town a sense of place that wasn't self-serving, where you could have a good effect without being a goody two-shoes like me. And when Kohorama got too unwholesome for some folks, you guys pivoted to a more clean-cut, Instagrammable festival. Hung out with your Kiwanis buddies and had a sharp sense of humor, fast wit, insightful, cutting, but not cruel. You ran the smallest of small businesses, you and a single employee, who you didn't trust but wouldn't fire. In the workroom, where you fashioned braces out of metal and leather in the days before prefab plastic, there used to be a map of South Vietnam so vets could point out where they sustained their wounds. In the waiting room, art connoisseur that you were, hung pictures of dogs playing poker, which are high on the list of things I wished I'd saved. You typed your own records on an electric typewriter with 2 fingers for 25 years, with a sliding scale for all. The poor didn't go without a brace simply because they couldn't afford it. They paid what they could afford, if anything. It all balanced out in the end. Eventually, when you had to sell to a corporation because the insurance companies didn't want to deal with such a small operation, you chafed at not being able to give a brace to those in need. That, you'd say, was the sign that you needed to get out. Saying no to someone in need wasn't part of your nature. You made a living making braces at the Great Lakes Naval Station and for adults with intellectual or physical disabilities at the Southern Wisconsin Center. Unable to rest, you volunteered for boards, serving on the Shalom Center board, feeding the hungry and sheltering those in need in Kenosha for more than 25 years. It's a list of accomplishment, and it's a list that you compiled not by asking what's in it for me all the time. Grateful for the middle-class life you enjoyed, you devoted yourself to us, your family, but you did more than that, and even better than that. You asked not what you could get out of something, but what you could give. Not what's in it for me, but what can I give to others. We talk about tikkun olam, about repairing a broken world, but you did more than talking, and kids got fed, shelters got built, people in need got braces, you befriended folks who had a rough time of it, hired for gigs, guys who had a tough time holding down a steady job. I got the sense that you never sat and wondered what the purpose of your life was. Not just that you thought that finding yourself was so much navel-gazing. I'm sure you thought that, but were too polite to say it to both of your slow-starting sons. But you lived each day with real gratitude for what had been given and a sense of what you owed, of how you could and did give back. He spent so much time hanging out with those with physical and mental challenges over the years that by the time Eitan was born, your love for him was just an extension of the sort of life you had been living for decades. As time went on, physical pain began to trip you up, but you never let up. Cancer in 2008, the year of aggressive, difficult treatments that left you in constant discomfort for each of your 14 remaining years. Endured without complaint. You tried to put a positive spin on everything. Like your mother would say, people have it worse. And she kept saying it, even when she got to the point where it wasn't really true anymore. So too with you. You traveled to see family as long as you could, until it just became impossible. Then you watched sports. Now I get it. The pain made it too hard to follow a TV show. Sports are tolerable even when you can't summon the strength to remain focused for long. And when things got bad enough that you fell back on a few tried and true phrases and stories, they were all about gratitude, not about being self-made, but about how much help you had along the way, not about what you couldn't do, but all about what Mom was doing and had always done, not about life's difficulties, but about life's blessings, not about how we were far away, but of how fortunate you felt. Blessed is the one who gives us life, it sustains us, and allows us to reach this moment. That night, that 90-minute-long hospital transfer was not successful. The Milwaukee hospital said they did not receive the patient they were told about. Your health, everything began to fail. By the time Mom and I arrived in the morning, a complex array of machines were sustaining you. One last desperate procedure proved fruitless. They sat us down in the "this can't be good" newsroom. Sure, there's a 1,000,000 to 1 chance that a miracle happens, but there's an almost certain chance that consciousness will never return, and that without massive mechanical life support, you wouldn't last 3 hours. People always say to me, Rabbi, we're a religion of life, and we always choose life, right? And we are, and we do. And it's a command, b'charta b'chaim, choose life, right there in the Torah. We also know from the sages of blessed memory that we always choose life, and that is not identical with artificially prolonging the dying process. Death will come to us all. And while we don't artificially hasten that moment, we need not seek to prolong suffering when the time is near. Mom and I did not have to deliberate long. We asked the medical staff to wait an hour for Andy's plane to land. And then we could take that last step. Andy arrived and said, this was an easy call. Dad, he said, you sent him instructions for medical decision-making years ago. I don't remember seeing that, I said. He just sent it to me, Andy said, to make sure that no religious stuff got in the way. Which, Baruch Hashem, as you're being practical to the last. Street smarts. I said the deathbed vidui, those confessional prayers that we say when we're not making it to the next Yom Kippur. And Rabbi Feingold arrived. She's been with our family since my bar mitzvah, and she wanted to be here with us now. And we said prayers and we sang songs, mainly folk songs, because that's what you liked. And let's face it, you never really liked the prayers. Hours went by, and as the night grew late, we had to send Rabbi Feingold home. And those 3 hours, they said that you would last, turned into 6, into 12. Into 24, into 48, into 72, but your heart wouldn't stop. And your family came in from across the globe to say goodbye. Yeah, I said a few psalms for me, but we mainly sang to you the songs that you liked. Puff the Magic Dragon, Time in a Bottle, Blowing in the Wind. Finally, on a Friday, the sun began to set, and Mom asked the nurse if they had Shabbos candles. 10 minutes later, a Protestant pastor walked in, kindly handed us 2 electric candles, said Shabbat Shalom, and left. We said the bracha. And just then the moment came. Dad, I think that if age 20, you were offered 100 different scenarios for how your life would play out, I think you would have chosen the one you got. We were there with you, and you are here with us. And I've thought of that story about the prayer in the woods often, months since those last bitterly cold, dark days when you left us during the Festival of Lights. Dad, there's so much that you knew that I don't. Finances, car stuff, family stuff, a cool way of being in the world. More often than not, I reached the conclusion that whatever I remember, it's not enough. And I know you wouldn't agree, but maybe it's just a little kid in me. But it seems like you knew the spot in the forest. You had the candle, and you had the words. All I have is a story, and I really don't know if it's enough. But I wanted to tell it anyway. Since you've been gone, there hasn't been a moment when I didn't have a good guess what you would have said in a given situation, or the advice you would have, or what your wishes would have been. We think we're islands, but we're oceans, flowing into and out of each other, never completely distinct. Our separation is an illusion. It's not something that's supernatural, it's just the way love works. I love you. Thank you, Dad. Love, Dan.